Snow, steel, and silence. In a frozen valley of the Rus, 10,000 Mongol riders advanced, unstoppable, merciless. Waiting for them were just 100 Vikings, the last Varangians of the north. No walls, no escape, only the will to stand. How could 100 Vikings stop 10,000 Mongol invaders? Welcome back to Echoes of Past, where history bleeds through steel and legend. Hit like, subscribe, and step into the snow where 100 men made history. By the middle of the 13th century, the Mongol war machine had become the most efficient and terrifying military force the world had ever seen. Under Batu Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, the Golden Horde swept through the Rus principalities with fire and precision. Entire cities, Ryazan, Vladimir, and Kiev, fell within weeks, their wooden walls no match for the mobility and discipline of Mongol cavalry. In this maelstrom of conquest, one of history's strangest encounters was born, not between nations or empires, but between two military traditions separated by centuries. Along the frozen valleys of northern Rus, remnants of the old Varangian Guard, the legendary Norse mercenaries who had once served Byzantine emperors, still lingered in service to local princes. Descendants of the Vikings who had sailed the rivers of the East in the 9th and 10th centuries, these men had long abandoned their Scandinavian homelands, but not their warrior ethos. The Mongols, by contrast, represented the future of warfare. Each unit could act independently, yet respond as part of a larger organism. Light cavalry archers formed the backbone of their power. Men capable of firing 6 arrows per minute while galloping at full speed, turning retreat into ambush and chaos into a trap. Against them, the heavy infantry of Europe, slow, rigid, and dependent on defensive formations, rarely survived direct contact. By 1240, most of Rus lay beneath Mongol tribute. Yet, in remote valleys and river settlements, isolated bands of warriors, local militias, Cuman remnants, and Varangian mercenaries continued to resist. These skirmishes, small and often forgotten, formed the undercurrent of a greater struggle, the final death throes of the old Norse-Rus martial culture before it vanished beneath Mongol dominance. One such clash occurred along an unnamed tributary of the Volga, somewhere between the forests of Murom and the marshes of the Upper Kama. Archaeological surveys and later chronicles mention a Valley of Shields, where a small Rus detachment, reportedly no more than 100 Varangian mercenaries, was cut off by a pursuing Mongol force numbering in the thousands. The event might have disappeared entirely from memory, if not for the sheer improbability of its outcome. There, on a strip of ice and mud no wider than a heartbeat, the old world met the new, the last sons of Odin facing the heirs of Genghis. The Mongol vanguard arrived before dawn. A thin mist hung over the frozen river, muffling sound and blurring movement. Scouts reported a handful of survivors retreating along the valley. Batu Khan's sub-commander gave a simple order: surround and destroy. But as the sun rose through the fog, the steppe horsemen found something unexpected. At the mouth of the valley, between the ice-choked river and a low ridge, a wall of shields glittered faintly in the morning light. 100 men stood shoulder to shoulder, round shields overlapping like scales of iron. Behind them, wooden stakes and sleds had been driven into the frozen soil, forming a crude palisade. There were no scattered fugitives. They had chosen their ground, and they were waiting. The Varangians, understood terrain the way seafarers understood wind. They had fought in Byzantine mountain passes and in Rus forests long before the Mongols were a whisper on the steppe. Here they had found a choke point where cavalry could not surround them, and where the snowdrifts turned horses into liabilities. The frozen river to their left and dense woodland to their right created a natural bottleneck, forcing the enemy to advance frontally. The Mongols began, as they always did, with the bow. Waves of light cavalry fanned out, loosing arrows in elegant arcs. The sky darkened briefly, then filled with the hiss of death. Yet, when the dust settled, the shield wall still stood. The Varangians had knelt behind overlapping shields, their cloaks stiff with frost, but their discipline unbroken. The curved Mongol arrows, fired from distance, struck at glancing angles, burying themselves harmlessly in the snow or splintering on iron rims. Realizing the volley was ineffective, the Mongols advanced closer. They fired in gallop, then feigned retreat, hoping to draw pursuit, an old steppe trick. But the Varangians did not move. They stayed rooted, silent, letting the Mongols waste arrows and energy against wood and will. Frustration grew among the Mongol ranks. Their commanders ordered a charge. Hundreds of riders thundered forward, lances lowered, confident that shock would break the static wall. But the frozen soil betrayed them. Horses slipped on ice, spears shattered against shields. When the first riders reached the line, the Vikings stepped forward in unison. Axes rose and fell in a rhythm of violence older than kingdoms. The impact was biblical. Horses screamed, men toppled, and the snow turned crimson. The Mongols pulled back, regrouped, and circled to find weakness. They tried fire arrows next, hoping to burn the defenders out. But the damp snow smothered the flames, and the Varangians only tightened formation. Each time the Mongols approached, a storm of axes and spears answered. The Norsemen fought not as individuals, but as a living wall, each shield covering his brother's flank. By midday, the valley had become a graveyard of broken mounts and shattered shafts. The Mongols were unused to such resistance from so small a force. Psychological warfare, drums, whistles, and feigned retreats failed to shake the defenders. Instead, it was the horsemen who began to feel the creeping weight of exhaustion and unease. Mongol doctrine relied on mobility and space. In the valley, they had neither. Their archery advantage diminished, their coordination faltered. Every charge narrowed the battlefield further, forcing riders into a killing zone. The Varangians exploited this, stepping forward between attacks to drag down wounded horses and strip usable weapons, turning Mongol spears into makeshift pikes. As the pale sun sank behind the ridge, the Mongol commander hesitated. Hours of assault had yielded nothing but frozen corpses and shattered pride. Night would soon turn the valley into ice and death. To fight on was madness. To withdraw was humiliation. At last, the horn sounded. The horsemen fell back in grim silence, leaving behind their dead and disbelief. By the next morning, the valley was silent again. Smoke rose from Viking fires as they burned their dead, marking the snow with the black scent of sacrifice. Their stand would never appear in official Mongol chronicles. Such defeats were beneath record. But in local legend, whispered by hunters and chroniclers of Rus, the tale endured. The day 100 men stopped 10,000. To historians, this encounter symbolizes the twilight of the Viking martial spirit, out of time yet undefeated in spirit.